And welcome.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Robust American Love. My name is Karen Karbiener, and I am the president of the Walt Whitman Initiative, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission it is to celebrate New York City's literary legacy and serve as an organizing center for cultural activism and poetry-related events, such as the one you are about to enjoy tonight. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram and tune into our YouTube channel to explore more presentations in our Robust American Love speaker series. By now, we've got like a beautiful stable of presentations, and you can always access past shows again on the YouTube channel. If you like what we're doing, there are many ways to support our programs. We appreciate all sorts of support. You can visit our website to find out how, or you can actually write to Walt at waltwhitmaninitiative.org. We decided to offer this speaker series, note the word speaker, not lecture, to present timely public facing conversations on Whitman's life, work, and legacy. You'll hear conversations and enjoy presentations by teachers, poets, grad students, artists, printers, neighborhood activists, you name it. They're not designed to be academic talks, but free, open, informal discussions that we end by inviting your questions for our Q&A at the end of each session. So if you're watching on YouTube tonight, at least nighttime New York time, please make sure to post your questions in the chat section, and we will try to get to them towards the end of the show. If you miss one of our events, again, you can always catch them on the Walt Whitman Initiative's YouTube channel. And you can check our website, waltwhitmaninitiative.org, to see the shows that are coming up. Now, just to give you a little taste of that, I'm very excited about our next two shows after Barbara Henry. November 12th, we've got Karen Coonrod coming on the show. The name is probably familiar to the Whitmanites out there. She's the director of Compagnia de Columbari, and she is going to be talking about the experiential show that she developed and has been putting on since 2012 called More or Less I Am. And she's going to show us clips, show us their recent video uploads, and talk about the challenges of this particular amazing Whitman show, which is based on lines from Song of Myself. So a bit of theater next week. And then November 19th, the Thursday following, we've got a guest speaker named Grayson Gill, who happens to be the proprietor and owner of Bellegarde Bakery in New Orleans. Also joining Grayson will be Steve Jones, who directs the Bread Lab at Washington State University. And Steve and Grayson will be talking about 19th century health reform and the bread revolution. Grayson has been baking professionally for about 11 years and was trained at the San Francisco Baking Institute under Michael Suas and Frank Sally. And Grayson's passion for bread stems from the craft's intricacies and interactions with the elements of fire, water, and fermentation. In 2020, he was a nominee for the Best Baker in America by the James Beard Foundation. Grayson is also one of my former students at NYU, a brilliant, brilliant guy, and the nicest and most socially minded, public-facing individual that you can meet. And also a dropout of NYU, guys. So you don't have to graduate to do something pretty spectacular. And he will be joined by Steve, another spectacular individual. We'll learn about the Bread Lab at Washington State University as they talk about health reform. This, of course, ties with Whitman, who wrote Manly Health and Training, a series of articles in the 1850s, and in general was very health-minded. So looking forward to hosting Grayson and Steve on November 19th. Today, it's a very special night for some not so good reasons, right? We're all tense and on edge about what's happening with our country and with the election. And so I'm very pleased to present you with a show I think that will relax you and put you in an excellent mood. I'm introducing one of my dearest friends and also one of the finest artists I have the privilege of knowing and actually working with, Barbara Henry, who is the proprietor of Harsimus Press. Barbara, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we are looking at you in Harsimus's kind of new studio, right? Do you just want to tell us where you are?
I am in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, a blue corner of Pennsylvania, I will add, where we're very, very tense here, but never mind. Yes, I have moved recently from New Jersey, or from Jersey City. So yes, I've been here that long. And we're in a house that was built in 1806. So just shortly before Whitman was born, and maybe this is about the same age as the house he was actually born in. It's a stone house, and I have the downstairs parlor for my print shop, which is equipped with a working fireplace, although I've blocked that off, and now with a Vandercook proof press and some racks of type. So I thought I would first start off by showing you.
Well, you know what? Wait a second, Barbara, because I'm going to introduce you more properly than that. Like we won't let you get away with that, right? I have to tell them a little bit about how accomplished you are. And I do want you to talk a little bit about your background, which is pretty extraordinary. So for those of you unacquainted with Barbara, if there's actually anybody out there that doesn't know Barbara, she holds an MFA in painting from American University. So she's a painter, but she also studied typography at the University of Iowa with Kay Amert. She was between 1985 and 2004 the curator of Bown and Company stationers at the South Street Seaport Museum in New York City. So for almost 20 years, Barbara ran the print shop that if you all are familiar with South Street Seaport area, it's a simulation, a kind of recreation of a 19th century shop, a really amazing place. Barbara transformed that location. That's where I got to know her. And she also runs her own press, which is called Harsimus. And I'm going to have her explain why it's called that. She does make books, and I have right here next to me some spectacular new books, Barbara, that I know that you have done. And she's working on some amazing projects. So she's going to tell us all about what she's been working on, some of her past projects, and also give us a tour of the studio, and even, and this is really special, do a little folding exercise with us to kind of try to break down the Zoom wall that we're all dealing with all the time. So you will actually be able to create your own project. You have to just go to the Walt Whitman Initiative.org website, from which you will be able to download 2 PDFs. And please do, and print them out, because we will be talking about how you can fold them and actually learn a bit about printing just from those 2 exercises. So multi-accomplished friend, Barbara Henry, who also teaches at the Center for Book Arts in the city, does all sorts of incredible art, especially Whitman based. That's why she's here with us today. So Barbara, again, I want to thank you for allowing us into your space. And I miss you a lot. I know when Barbara was living in Jersey City, we saw a lot more of her, but the tide of New York real estate just swept out a lot of artists and people who just couldn't afford the prices. And I'm so glad you guys found a beautiful place to be down in Pottstown, and that you're still producing. And in fact, it looks like you have, can I say, an even better setup that you had in Jersey City? Or is it comparable to what Harsimus was when you were up in New Jersey?
It's pretty much the same. The room is a different shape, but it's all the same stuff.
Well, can you tell us a little bit, because obviously we're looking at your space and there's lots of serious looking machines for people who don't know anything about printing. And for those who do, we're salivating with envy about what you've got over there in your own private house. How did you get into all of this? How did the printing obsession start?
I went to the University of Iowa to study etching. After realizing that I wasn't ever going to make a living as a painter, I thought I could teach printmaking, which was kind of something that universities were setting up at the time. So after a year of studying etching, I realized I wasn't happy as an etcher. It was too chemical. It was too, I don't know. It just wasn't direct enough. I liked engraving. I liked directly carving into the metal and making lines, but I didn't really like all the chemicals. So I had a friend who had made a book. I had started making relief prints, wood cuts, lino cuts, mostly wood cuts from old wood that was in construction sites. And he showed me a book that he'd made of with a Samuel Beckett text with etchings as illustrations. And I suddenly realized that this could pull my whole life together, that I had been writing rhymed verses when I was 8, and I still would write the occasional poem just for the hell of it. And I thought, this is my chance. So I had to go to another department. I had to do some paperwork, and I was able to enroll in Kay Amherst's typography class. And it did change my life. The minute I walked in, I thought, this is where I need to be. So they couldn't get rid of me after that. And I think one of the things that actually made it all better was the specimen page. She gave me a tri-folded small piece of paper with every typeface they had in the shop set in a text. And that for me was the moment when I knew that this was something I could spend the rest of my life working on. So I was lucky after that to then get the job at the South Street Seaport Museum, where that was the crux of my whole responsibilities. I had all these typefaces that hadn't been cataloged. No one knew what they were. So when I started as a volunteer, my first question was, where's your specimen book? And they said, we don't have one. And I said, all right, let's make one. And so we got a grant and did. And I spent the next 3 years making the specimen book for the South Street Seaport Museum.
Maybe you could tell people, just in case they don't know, what a specimen book actually is.
Well, when you get to the slides, I think I can do that, but it is a catalog that founders make of all their typefaces. And you're used to it when you do change typefaces on your computer. You'll see all the little names of typefaces, and it's really the same thing, only of course in the 19th century it had to be in a book form, or in the 18th century it was often just a piece of paper with a broadside with type. Anyway, a lot of different textures of letter forms, really nice. And in the 19th century, the lines themselves would be very creative. They didn't just use the alphabet, they made sentences. And that was because they were afraid someone would steal the design if they showed them all the letters. But it also made it really fun to read. And some of them, they knew to make it fun to read. It was, part of an advertising strategy.
And I'm looking forward to looking at your slides, because I know that you have some really cool slides showing the work that you've done with these.
I met Karen at the Seaport, and she asked me to look at the 1860 Leaves of Grass. And while I was doing that, I read the poem that Walt Whitman wrote called Faces, which actually seems to have to do with typefaces. So I set that poem as a specimen with different typefaces, because that was my favorite thing to do. I've done 4 or 5 different, but I tend to turn everything into a specimen book. And just because I like using different typefaces. So it kind of, it's a theme for me.
If you see what I did, Barbara, with my background, that's maybe my favorite line of cut I've ever seen of Walt Whitman, but this is in the book Faces.
So the book that we did in 2012 is an analysis of the poem Faces, and Karen wrote a very nice introductory essay on Whitman, and then I wrote why I did what I did. That's the frontispiece behind her.
I love this piece. And Barbara, it seems pretty obvious why you would be attracted to Whitman, because he kind of,
his lifespan is like almost the same as the history of 19th century printing. He was born 2 years before the Washington iron hand press was first invented, that was the press that really started off iron presses in America and started off the Industrial Revolution in printing here. And during his lifetime, one major thing would happen after another that brought things along. And he was on top of it. He was paying attention to what was happening as he was trained as a young man, but as a boy, actually, to be as an apprentice printer. So he was paying attention to everything that happened. And throughout his lifetime, as things progressed, he actually died the year that the American Type Founders Company was consolidated. All the foundries in the country became one big monopoly. That was kind of signaling the end of an era for printing in the United States. So you can look at his life, which I have done, in terms of step by step, all the improvements in printing. Should I go set a line of type now so you can?
Well, actually, not quite yet, because I wanted people to see some of your latest projects so that we could see what you're up to. But even before that, I need to tell the audience that you have written about Whitman as printer poet. You jumped in and said the reason that you admired Whitman is because his life kind of spans and tells the story of printing. I think that's
besides the poetry.
right. But I do think that that is a really important project that needs to be written, right? Like the story of printing through the life of Walt Whitman. And you would be the person to do something like that.
Printing, it's, well, like for instance, his famous frontispiece of the first edition, that engraving that's in there, is because they invented daguerreotypes when he was very young, and then you still couldn't print them in a book. He had to get then that transferred into a printmaking process, like engraving, in order to reproduce it. And then it wasn't until the very end of his life that the halftone screen was invented and you could actually print a photograph. So all that happened in his lifetime. And he was very involved in being photographs taken.
Absolutely. So, just for those of you out there, Whitman is born in 1819 and dies in 1892. So his life basically spans the 19th century. But as Barbara says, as someone who had a hand in making his books and really thought about the experience of the text, right, the material text, to tie in Whitman's history as a printer with the general history of printing that is going on at the time is a really fascinating venture. Barbara has written about this. She published a very important piece on the 1860 edition in the Huntington Library Quarterly in December 2010, I think it was. That's an article that I still send students to go see because we very seldom get the printer's perspective on Whitman. And it's such an important relationship that they have. So I'm really pleased that you're here to kind of give us Walt from that angle. But I also wanted just to have a chance to look at some of your projects. I know you held up Faces, which is, of course, I love that book, right, about Whitman's use of typefaces. But you're also working on this unusual map project, right, which you're updating every day.
Well, that's because of COVID-19. And you can't. I had several classes canceled at the beginning, and there were no book fairs to go to sell. And I thought, why am I making multiples at this time? This is a time when you can just make one because no one's going to see it for a long time. Anyway, I did a series. So because can you see this? This is a daily practice that I do and have done since the beginning of June, of making a combination weather map and coronavirus tracking map every day. And basically I do a pochoir, which is a stencil with gouache of the just the lower 48. I apologize to Alaska and Hawaii. And the major weather events are written in black. And then in red, I will chart the coronavirus. And they've evolved over time, they've changed. I have now a large amount of them.
Wow, amazing.
Well, here's election day.
Oh my goodness.
And here's awaiting election results, so we know where we are. But you know, every day they're different, but they all have a family resemblance. And now I'm hoping that at the end of all this, I can put them all together into something.
Well, are you interpretive about the weather, or are you really accurate?
Whether from the New York Times or from NOAA, because I don't, and occasionally someone in the country will email me and say, hey, you forgot my derecho that we had. So I will redo it or add it in. And so I always appreciate when people tell me what local event that, since mine is Northeast biased, and the wildfire thing is another thing that I've had, like, people tell me that has to be there. So yeah, I take suggestions. But you know, on the other hand, what I think I'm really doing is just mapping my anxieties at this point. That's what this sort of era is all about. And weather is something, I've had a tree fall over. We've had several big storms, the climate change. This started out as a climate change idea and evolved into this rather quickly. But you just, yeah, it's hard not to be involved in this very anxious time that we're living in. So.
I think they're absolutely beautiful. And how can people keep track of them? Are you posting them somewhere?
I post them on Facebook.
Okay, there you go. So your Facebook page, is there a name that people should know?
I believe it's just my name.
Not Harsimus Press, but Barbara Henry.
No, I think it is Harsimus Press, actually.
Okay, so just those of you that are intrigued with this, please check them out over there.
Yeah.
Is there
Press?
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure it's Harsimus Press.
Is there anything else that you're working on that you want to call some attention to?
When we did our house, my husband did most of the work. We decided that he built himself an etching press, and we decided to do a book. So this is larger format than I am really comfortable with, but he did a bunch of etchings. Now, these are a pair of old blue jeans that he found in the attic. And so I've had to make folio covers for them with the subject matter and his commentary on what he's doing. And this one was interesting because, although there are two shoes pictured.
Wow, they're spectacular. So this is Matt Schley is Barbara's husband, and he is an artist.
I met him at studying etching at Iowa. So he is an actual printmaker that actually is good at etching. And apparently shoes were hidden in the 18th century and before in English houses. It was their spiritual middens. You would hide a well-worn shoe under the floorboards to either as just a good luck charm or to encourage childbirth in the home. And
what? How on earth does that encourage childbirth?
There is a huge database in the UK of single shoes found concealed in the floorboards of old houses. So it's a real thing.
Oh my God, that's
so we found one here under the floorboards in the attic. So that was sort of an amazing thing to find.
So can this is spectacular, and this looks like a really big project, right? To put together all the different.
These will end up being a portfolio, and they're not going to be bound. They're separate things that'll be in a box, I hope. And I'm making 10, so it's a very small edition because etchings are hard to print, and we didn't want to make that many. So, yeah, it's fun. So this is wood type, and I only have enough. Sometimes I have to turn the eyes upside down to make another L. You can do that with wood type. So yeah, so that's fun. And I'm trying to, working with one's husband is not the easiest thing. So I'm trying to edit carefully. He's an English teacher, but his grammar is not up to my standards sometimes.
Stop right there, Barbara, because Matt is watching for sure. So Matt, hello, we love you.
He's not watching. But anyway, yes. So the challenge is to preserve the voice while putting the commas in the right place. Yeah.
I think that's a spectacular project. And who's doing the write-ups on the front page there, the item descriptions?
I wrote a little description of the day we found the house and how the real estate agent thought it was a haunted house and didn't want to come past the front hallway. She just let us loose to go find out what the house was like. She didn't want to do it. And it had stood empty for 30 years. So she didn't think she was going to sell anything. I'm sure she thought we were nuts. But he wrote all the descriptions of the things that he found. It's basically his book. I just wrote the little introduction.
Well, that's an amazing project that I have not seen and is very different from the work that you usually do. I'm just going to bring people to the Harsimus Press website. Is that okay for a second? Because I feel like we want to get into your studio, but I also don't want to leave too much out here. And I'm going to move us up. And Barbara, I really love the organization of your website. It reminds me of Walt calling Leaves of Grass, the titles of the poems being Leaves of Grass and also the book being Leaves of Grass, because here you have books in print, more books in print,
Well,
new and forthcoming with capitals, new and forthcoming with lowercase. Is there actually like and then 2 random reports? Is this kind of an inside printer's joke?
no, it's because the pages are a certain length and I don't know how to make them longer. So I just have to make another one. I suppose I should put it 2 after.
It's just kind of fun. And I mean, you've talked about a number of these things, but I thought maybe you could say a few words about random reports because they're so amazing.
Random reports is another I like to work in series. It's a bunch they're poems that are written from vocabulary lists from the New York Times. So those are all dated with the date of the vocabulary from the Times that I have to work with. And that I throw half of my vocabulary away, but what's left becomes the poem. And so I make these, I've been making these for a long time. I don't even know when the first one was.
I know. I think I have the whole running series of the random reports. I haven't seen this one though, Transit.
And that was partly inspired by moving, but it was also inspired by reconnecting with a college friend who did the illustrations for this. Usually I do my own illustrations, but I had just refound this friend that I hadn't seen in a really long time, and she wanted to do something, so I took her drawings, and they were difficult to print, but we made it work. And yeah, I was happy to work with her. I do like working with other people.
Beautiful. But these are listed as random reports. Are they part of the random reports series?
The rules change over time because I make them up, so I can.
I like your way of thinking. I think the audience is getting a really good feel for what you're doing. Just one word on this gorgeous book, Below the Fold.
On the left is Kluge, which I'm working now on an asemic typeface that's sort of, it can be imaginary language, or it can be patterns like normal printer's flowers can be. So this book was random reports poems with fake illustrations with asemic type that you don't read.
You might have to explain what asemic type is, actually.
It means no, not semantic value. No, it doesn't mean anything. It looks like language, but it isn't.
I love that concept. So you look at it and you kind of want to read it, but you realize that this is like Martian writing or something.
And I wanted originally to call this Martian, but my friend, the type founder, reminded me that Martian would actually be a language. So that wasn't what I wanted to do.
I thought you were going to say that Martian kind of dated us, because I don't think anyone says Martian anymore.
That dates me.
Um,
In British Columbia that's supposed to resemble ancient Martian lakes. So it's still being developed. It's not done yet. He says he will finish it. So someday there'll be quilts
well,
available for anybody who wants to set type.
that's awesome. Well, there's many more books to look at, but I feel like we're going to run out of time with the wealth of material we have to share with the audience. And I think the next thing we were planning was a little studio tour and the folding exercise.
Okay, I am going to move my computer over here. So maybe I'll turn off the video for just a minute so you don't all get nauseous.
We're not going to get woozy as you move us over. And I think it's actually pretty amazing to move on the type case with Barbara Henry. So we worked on this, everybody, to position the camera so that we could actually see her at work.
I'm starting it again. There I am. Let's see if I can get it balanced so that you can you see the, there.
That's great. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
We can't see, can you move it up a little bit because your head, we can't see your full face.
Oh, that doesn't, you're looking at my hands.
Excellent. That's it.
Okay, so I'm holding a composing stick. So for those of you who don't know, type is stored in a case. This is a California job case, which is designed to hold both an upper and lower case. Originally, of course, the upper and lower case were separate cases. And that's why we call letters upper and lower case today. I've told people that for 30 years. So I'm always amazed that I have to repeat it. But some people say, and if you ever have, well, never mind. Anyway, so this is a composing stick, and the type that's in here, separate tiny little slivers. This is actually bigger than most text types. It's 12 points high, and they're all stored in places that you memorize where they all are. So when you're a printer, the first thing you do is figure out where all the type is, and Whitman has actually written about that in his memoir.
And actually, I will just interrupt briefly to say that one of the handouts, you know, your bound handout has a California type case right there, right in as part of it. So folks, if you are watching and I think you can go to the YouTube chat, or you can go to our website, waltwhitmaninitiative.org, and look up Barbara Henry's event, and you'll see 2 downloadable PDFs. So please do look at them, and you'll get a really good look at what Barbara is working on right there at her workspace.
So this is a line from the etching book that I'm working on. And as you can see, you have to put enough type in to fill out your line. And yet every piece here is completely separate and loose. So you have to put in just the exact right amount of metal into this line so that it stays tight, and nothing will fall over when you go to ink it up. The thing about printing from this is that you're printing from a million different tiny little things, and everything has to be rock solid by the time you put it in the press. So that means you clamp it. You have spring-loaded clamps that keep everything from moving. But the real trick is to set it properly. And the last thing you do when you're setting your line.
Hey, Barbara, can you move? I know I told you to move up the camera. Can you move it a little down? Because just so that people can see the whole, yes, the composing stick. Awesome. Great.
The last piece that you put in to make it tight, that's called justifying your line. And the end of Whitman's poem that so fascinated me was has the word justified is the end of the poem. Really.
That's the poem called Faces, which was one of the 12 original poems in Leaves of Grass when it was first published.
You'll find in that poem there are quite a few printing terms that are used, and printing terms tend to be very sort of moral and rigorous. You justify your line, you perfect your page. You have to be right on about this, because if you don't do this right, nothing will print. It doesn't work. So it's very important that this be justified. That's like a key thing. And that's one of the first things you have to learn in order to set any type. The way that you do it is you place I usually start with an M, which is a blank piece.
Right, and that's actually spelled EM.
Right, it is. And the half of an M is an N, which is spelled EN. And those are good Scrabble words. You put the type in upside down. So that means I can set line 2 right over line 1 without having to take line 1 out. And you just take the letters one by one out of the compartments, and I'm not spelling anything here.
I thought you were going to be setting some kind of gorgeous Whitmanic line here.
Well, I can't think straight enough to do that. So when you get to the end of a word, then you have a lower space that you put in. That's just a placeholder. So then you can continue on, and the two words will be separated. And then you continue on until you justify your line. And I think that's all I pretty much have to show you about that. But this is the type case. This is a type rack. Contains 48 cases, each case containing a typeface. Some of them are the same typeface in different sizes. Some of them have italic. But I have a weird mix of things I like and things I was able to get.
Barbara, could you open up one of the drawers closest to us so we could just get a feel for how that works? And then you just take the drawer out and you put it on top of your table there, right?
Yes. And there's can you see that?
So this is really awesome because for those of you that are listening, Whitman had to drop out of school at a very early age. He was about 11. And he basically learned to love language on the printing house floor. So in standing in front of these typecases, that's where he really learned about vowels and putting together language. And that's the basis for Barbara's one handout that she did at Bound, I think in 2004. So just a really lovely way of remembering that some people just access poetry in different ways. And thank you, Barbara, for showing us that. Where are we going next?
Well, we in a minute, we should do some folding, don't you think?
I think so. So I hope all of you are ready to do this. Again, you can download and print out the 2 different handouts, the PDFs, at our website, waltwhitmaninitiative.org, at Barbara Henry's event, or in the YouTube chat if you are on right now. And yeah, Barbara, I think you can just lead us, even people who might not have the sheet in front of them. Maybe you can coach them on how they can do this really fun book exercise without too much knowledge.
Or you can draw something on it that you can do right now. But a blank sheet of paper is fine. This is 8.5 by 11, regular printer paper. And what you want to do, this is the handout. So what you want to do first is fold it lengthwise. Now I use a bone folder, which is sold in art supply stores. Is the lighting okay here?
Yeah, I think you could point the camera a little bit further down on your desk so that we can see things a little more clearly. And this is all touch and go. You're doing amazing. Oh, perfectly framed.
What I have here is I have a cutting mat because I'm going to have to use a knife. So you'll need a sharp knife, a triangle or metal ruler to make sure you cut a straight line, and a bone folder, or should you not have one, you can use sort of a roundish pen or pencil plastic that will make a crease. So I take the paper and the printing part would be on the outside. That's going to be the cover. And you fold it lengthwise first.
And you actually designed this. I have to thank you again for one of my classes. It says Poet of the Body. I have my own copy right here, New York's Walt Whitman. And so the whole idea, guys, is that now first you got an introduction to the actual printing process. Now you're going to learn a little bit about how a book is put together. And this very simple exercise here that actually gives you a very neat little foldable book. So go ahead, Barbara. I think a lot of people will probably be able to stop and start the video and follow you. So I'm just going to let you go on with this.
Okay. The beauty of this is that it makes a book that you don't have to sew, and it has multiple pages. So like Whitman, if you like to keep a little piece of paper in your pocket to write on, to compose your poems as you walk or sit under a tree somewhere when you're supposed to be working, you can easily make one of these to do that with, and it doesn't weigh anything. So anyway, then you fold it again. So we folded it twice, in half and in half again, and now in half again, lengthwise. And that then puts the cover on the cover. Now, what you have here is just a folded piece of paper. So you unfold it. Now we're going to cut a slit from the first folds to the last fold, through the middle, not including the two first halves, okay? The two sections. All right, so we're gonna line up our ruler with the fold and cutting exactly on the fold between the first fold and the last fold. Just like that. And then you fold it again like this. And now you're going to have to reverse one of your folds. So the back page, where there's no printing, the middle fold here, you need to just change its direction. So just pinch it that way. And then you put the whole thing together, and it magically becomes a little book. And if you just sort of crisp up your folds, you'll see now you have something you can write on, draw on. I've done one here. So you can make your own little pictures. And I've done a bunch of these with printing. They're very fun.
Oh, wow.
This one is, I've used my abstract type it's called Lessons in Abstraction. So, and then here's one where it was done for a poem in your pocket day, so it has a pocket at the back, but it's basically the same, only instead of doing it this way with the fold at the top, like this one is, the fold's at the bottom, so the pocket doesn't fall out. So that it's a nice thing. And if you want to make it even fancier, this is one I did for a class, and the class later redid it for me in color, because we just printed it in one color. We didn't have time. So this is your original folded sheet. And then they put a decorative paper and sewed it like a regular book to make it a little more special. So that was fun.
And it's wonderful. I think that Walt would totally approve. I wonder if he knew about things like this, because he often made his own notebooks, mostly out of scrap, just using any sort of, whether it was surgical thread during the Civil War or whatever it was, to bind them together. So this is a very Whitmanic exercise to just make do with a piece of paper and actually make your own little book.
This is a book made along more traditional lines, like Whitman would have done for his own notebooks. So this is the book that Karen and I worked on at Bound & Company Stationers, and that, I believe, is your handout. So this is a piece of paper. Again, I've just used the same, I just printed it in a different place, the same 8.5 by 11 sheet, just folded in half horizontally, and then one more time again, and you've got what we call a signature. So if you would cut the top two folds here, you would then have 8 pages, but or you can leave the fold alone and have 4 pages. So that would be traditional bookbinding, and that's the kind of thing that Whitman would definitely have have been aware of, and that these books are then just sewed. So it's a figure 8 stitch. You just start in the middle, you go to either end, and you tie it, and that's that holds it together.
The paper that you're using for the cover looks like leather. It's such a cool texture.
It's a mold-made German paper called Kluge, and it's just pretty. So yeah, if you find a nice paper, that's part of, you know, how you sell your book. You make a nice cover, so you can judge it by its cover.
Barbara, thank you so much for that. I mean, teachers out there, I see the light bulbs going on over your heads, and I have used both of these folding exercises with Barbara's help in my classes. It's a great way to make students appreciate the hands-on material book that we keep talking about, that Whitman focused on in his life. So thank you for that, Barbara. And I'm thinking, how do you feel about going through the slideshow?
I will move my machine back here. I'm not going to turn it off this time. I'll just move it.
A woman of many talents who's moving around. I really appreciate all of your attention with all of these things. And I know you've put together a slideshow. I'm going to share my screen to bring everybody there. So, and let me see, I'm going to make us, let's see, maybe I can put us up here and I will play the slideshow so we have everything at access. All right.
There we go. There's Walt. That's just for fun for starting.
Well, not just for fun. This was an exquisite line of cut that you put out for the
and coloring.
Right. The bicentennial year. I know you did a lot of different Whitman posters, and I see that you're actually still selling them, some of them at the Harsimus site. Is that right?
Yeah, there's some posted on the website. Yes, there is. This one isn't, I don't think, but this one is, he's been lying in the grass. He stained his shirt.
So with a liner cut, could you just tell people what that is?
Yeah, it's a piece of linoleum like they used to make floors out of, and you can carve it like wood. And that was first discovered by Max Weber, I think, in the beginning of the 20th century, and Picasso did a whole bunch of really nice ones in the 60s. So he kind of legitimized it. But yeah, it used to be taught to school children everywhere until some people became afraid of letting school children have anything sharp. So, but yeah, it's an easy cutting thing. And they make soft things you can cut now too that function like linoleum, and you can print them on a press like type. And that's why I like it, because I can use my equipment.
I love the sharp, thick lines, especially the lines of the shirt. And you know what? I noticed that we are kind of hanging into the image. So I'm just going to move us over here and let's see, make it big again. So yes, that way we have little interference with our images. Okay, so shall I go to the next slide?
Yes, that's the beginning. So this was an exciting thing. In the Whitman show at the Morgan Library, they had this painting, which I thought, oh my God, that's exactly what the book was about. That's what I was talking about. This was painted in 1849 by a little-known artist named Frederick Spencer. And in the back of that newsboy is a whole wall of broadsides with 19th century type that are just everywhere. And I thought, well, that's what Walt's poem is all about, is the faces that are everywhere looking back at him. So I only wish they had put my book next to this painting in the exhibit, but I was very excited to see it because it's owned by a private person and you never see it anywhere. It's
well, I know well, a lot of us know the curator of that show at the Morgan Library. That was Ted Widmer, who was actually here on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about his new book, Lincoln on the Verge. So let's see if Ted can hook up the private collector who owns this gorgeous painting and do it some justice. Put Faces, the book, right next to it.
Make a nice cover for the paperback.
Absolutely.
Next one. Okay, so here's what Whitman was talking about. This is New York, 1845 something. This is a commercial district. All the buildings had signs all over them telling you who was there and what they were doing. And this was actually for a picnic that they were all going on, so everybody was outside. It wasn't always this populated, but the buildings were the same. So, you know, this is basically Whitman's New York. This is what he liked and what he was talking about when he wrote a poem about faces. We can go to the next one now.
I love it. I love all the different types of typeface that you see here too. It's really amazing.
And of course, there's a printer. These are the two presses in Columbia, and I like this because I only have to have one slide for two different kinds. The first one is a common press, which is all presses were made out of wood from their invention in the 15th century until 1800, when the first iron hand press was made. So that first press is a now sort of functioning common press. And
didn't you fix it for Columbia?
I fixed the only thing that was wrong with it was that the leather straps that run the type in and out of the platen were broken. So, because it hadn't been used in so long. So I just put new straps on it and I made them out of, we used a plastic, a modern material that won't break like the leather ones did. So if they only use it once every 10 years, it'll still be around for a much longer time. But yeah, it basically functions and it requires quite a bit of strength to use. So the iron hand press was an improvement because it required less physical strength to pull the lever to lower the type onto lower the platen onto the type. But it still required two people to run it. And the top speed on a press like that was 240 sheets an hour. The biggest improvement in speed was caused by the fact that the platen in an iron press could be twice the size of the platen in a wooden press. So that you could print an entire form, as you'll see on the chase on the bed of the wooden press. You'll see that that's a lot bigger than the little platen that's sitting under the, by the rails, by the sides of the press there. I forgot what they're called. And on an iron press, that platen will be twice that big. So you could print the whole thing all at once. So that already gives you twice the speed. So it was a big improvement. And that Washington press was patented in 1821 when Whitman was 2 years old. So this had just happened. So he was still using that press in 1850. By then, that press was kind of old-fashioned and only used in smaller shops. That's sort of how fast things started to happen once they did. But in fact, for Whitman, it was all cutting-edge technology that he was involved with. So if you want to go on to the next one. Then what happened was, for smaller shops, this slide has two things in it too. It has the platen presses in the front, which were developed to print tickets and business cards and little things. And the ink disc was only added to them when Whitman was very young too. So these were the really important one that captured the American market wasn't built until 1850. So this was a not for books, but for other kinds of printing like advertising flyers. These were very important and brand new developments during Whitman's lifetime. And behind them, you'll see a newspaper press. That particular one wasn't built until the beginning of the 20th century. It isn't that different from the earlier ones. There were newspaper presses along those lines in the 1880s, but I don't have a picture of them. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see me being surprised at how the press takes the paper away from you, so that this press can be run by one operator and it's printing thousands of copies an hour. And part of the reason for that is that the operator doesn't have to do much except make sure that everything is going okay once it's set up. So the press actually suctions off the paper for you and feeds the sheets one by one as they go in. So that, once you start having things going around, things can go very quickly. And that happened once they were starting to make them out of metal.
Where is this, Barbara?
This was taken at a museum in Iowa, in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, where they specialize in steam-powered farm machinery, but they have a whole barn full of printing equipment too that works. And every year they have a festival where people come in. All their equipment works, and so they have people doing it all. This was Ladies of Letterpress had a special event here, and I was teaching the Platen Press class here.
Is that an official club, the Ladies of Letterpress?
Letterpress, that's an official thing, yes.
Awesome. We've got to get them on the show. Ready?
Okay, next slide. And now, the big hang up with the type for Whitman's lifetime was how to make it quickly, and then how to set it. But up until 1838, type was made by hand, the same way that Gutenberg basically had made it. This is a hand mold, and you'll see the little pieces of type that have come out of the mold, and they contain the jet too attached to it, which is the part where when you pour, you have to pour type into the mold by hand with a little ladle. I think the ladle is over there on the right. You pour a little molten lead, 700 degrees, into the type mold. And the part where you pour it makes that jet that comes off the back of the type. So the letter is at the other end, at the bottom. So gravity is helping the lead go to the bottom, and you shake it when you cast a piece of type. So you might be able to, I forgot, was it 1 a minute if you're really, really good at making really small type. That circular thing there is the handle for holding the thing. And it's made of wood so that it doesn't conduct heat because 700 degrees. And the metal cools almost as soon as you've done it. So you've basically pouring the type in and then separating the pieces of the mold, knocking the type out, and then putting it back together again to pour it back in. And then you give that whole mess of type there to a boy in the foundry who will then break the jet off and plow the feet, which means you put the type all upside down in a row and you make a little groove that cuts off any rough edges from that jet that's in there. And that will make you a finished piece of type. So, and also then you have to sort of grind off any irregularities on the sides of the type. If you go to the next slide, those are on the top is a piece of handmade type. And you'll see how rough it is. You have to smooth out what's called dressing the type after you've cut off the jet. Dress the sides, and then you have a completed piece of type. The bottom piece of type is made by machine. That machine was invented first in 1838. And that was a New York founder from the Bruce family invented the machine, but he couldn't sell it to his own foundry. So he sold it to the Boston foundry. They first used it. It was a huge success. And that place ended up being the foundry that cast the type for the 1860 Leaves of Grass that Walt Whitman eventually produced. So it was just kind of a nice little synchronicity that happened there. But the type casting machine revolutionized the making of type, because not only did it make type faster, it also allowed it to become more delicate. So that meant that you could ornament it. You could make these crazy 19th century designs that were alternately hated and loved by typographers who follow the fashions. So yeah, it was a big deal. So then the problem was we've made type fast. Now we have to learn how to set type fast. That took until 1886. So for most of Whitman's life, type had to be set by hand. Yeah. And that's how it was done. That's a lowercase. So if you're setting a lot of type, you've got your lowercase and your uppercase, because you've got to hold a lot of pieces of type in order to set anything. So the lowercase holds a lot more type than a standard California job case that I just used and showed you before. That, by the way, is an English case, which is slightly different than an American lay. They had a no place to put the lowercase k, because the lowercase k box that I'm used to using, which was normal in America, was used for putting your candle in to set type in the dark. So you could put the k somewhere else, anywhere else you like to put it. That was something I thought was interesting.
As you see by my name, I'm very concerned with that idea of the Ks.
Yeah, it's very important where the Ks are. So if you want to check to the next slide. Well, can we go on?
Sorry.
That's and that I believe is Whitman that set, and that's a stick that Whitman might have seen. That's a historical stick. So we can go on because I already did that. Now, the first typefaces that were used in America were mostly all imported. So the first type foundry in America opened in 1796, Binney and Ronaldson in Philadelphia, but they didn't start patenting their own type designs until 1860. This was the first type design that was patented in America. So you can see it's relatively patriotic. It was in black and white. And then if you go to the next slide, it was also separated out to print in color. So you'd need 2 pieces of type to print those letters. But that is a big deal. And that comes from the Specimen Book of Lawrence Johnson, who Whitman had to have known at least about, and probably he knew him personally. There's a notebook entry where he says, I looked through Lawrence's book and I found some typefaces, and he makes a list of typefaces to use for the 1860 Leaves of Grass, where he had professional typographers doing the setting and printing, and he had money to spend because he had real publishers. So he was going to be ambitious. And it was a lovely moment to be ambitious, because the United States was just becoming now the center for innovative type design in the at least the English-speaking world. Anyway, we were no longer dependent on Europe for all our type designs. And this was just the first one. So can go on. There were many more to come. But one of the things that hadn't happened yet was we didn't have the point system. So the point system was adopted in about 1886. And before that, type was referred to by the name of its size. So between foundries, these would vary just a little bit. So if you bought your type from one foundry, you'd have to buy all your spacing material from the same foundry. It was a way of kind of like Sears used to do with staplers. You had to buy everything from the same place. But the names of the typefaces were used in Walt Whitman's poem, A Font of Type, which he wrote in 1888, just after this happened. So I think that was really a sort of sentimental look back at names of types that, you know, the kids aren't going to know anymore. So, but that he grew up with. So great primer is 18-point type, English is 14, pica is 12, small pica is 10, small pica is 11, long primer is 10, and Burjois is 9, and they go on. But next slide, there's another one. So first you've got, this is just all for nomenclature, but the first I love this piece. This is from a children's book and was published by Dickinson, who was a founder in Boston in I think probably in the 1840s. The first part of it shows you different kinds of type, and you'll see that they're all the first block of text is it's all readable. Different sizes, starting with Great Primer 18 and going down. And then he goes into different kinds of type. And you'll see that the typefaces themselves don't have names. That's my point. They have the name of the size and the name of the kind of type that they are. It's a generic name, so that it's Gothic, or it's condensed, or it's extended, or it's script. It doesn't really, it's not like today when you give normally a typeface a name. That took a while to happen. So, and it started really in 1860, but this is before that. Next slide.
You know, Barbara, I just noticed I'm totally absorbed in what you're doing here, but we're at 7:05 and normally the show ends around 7. So do you think we could have another 5 minutes or so just to keep it in the house?
The one thing is the bottom corner of this is a stereotype plate, and the way that after the 1855, which was probably printed from the type, the next book was probably printed, the second edition, from stereotype plates, which we know it was, which are casts of completed type forms. So this one is a cast of a wood engraving, so you can see all the marks of the tools that were used to make it. But it's a metal cast of, you could do that with type, so that you could put the type away after you set the book and still print an edition, maybe a later edition. You wouldn't need the type again. So that was another big step forward, and that happened during Whitman's lifetime too. And they refined it to electrotyping in 1840, which is what they used for the 1860. And that process was slightly better than the stereotype plate. It made a better cast. So we could stop here.
Okay, I guess.
And the nice thing was, in 1829, they had the first cloth bindings, which Whitman was using on his 1855. That technology wasn't even that old either.
I want to write this book with you, my dear. This sounds like a really fun and important book to write about just like the coinciding history of Whitman and the world of print. So, Barbara, I'm sorry that we had to cut short the slides. I see that there were a number of other slides, especially on the history of Leaves of Grass. That seems to me like we could have a whole other show on that.
Talk all night, so you have to just stop me at some point.
Well, it is amazing. We have to. Would you come back to the show? Would you entertain that thought?
If you wanted, I would be happy to.
We would love to have you back to complete the story of Leaves of Grass. But for now, we're going to be true to our listeners who fully expect a show of about an hour. So I think we will try and wrap it up. And I will just end by saying, Barbara, we are so really grateful for your time and your expertise. Again, I don't know anyone like you that knows quite as much about Whitman from this angle and who produces such fine work. If you like what you've seen, everyone out there, you can visit the Harsimus Press website and take a look at some of Barbara's work. There's also contact information about Barbara there. She does do commissioned work as well. As she says, she is not the quickest, but she is the best. And I would totally second that. Barbara, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Karen, for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
A real pleasure in a time that we can't just visit with each other, to actually just spend some quality time even across the screen. So thank you everyone for tuning in as well today. Wonderful to have you out there, and I hope you join us next week for Karen Coonrod and a bit of More or Less I Am. Take care, everyone. Hopefully next week too, we'll be more certain of some good news.